Hello.
Stupid.
You can see, you look, it says go live when we go live. Like you can see that
Okay,
that's what
go
comes
live.
up.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Good day. Welcome to Leprechaun Alley. My name is Ray Carey Perillo.
I am Michael P.
Michael G.
Oh, that's right. I'm G. Michael G. Perillo.
He just recently learned his name syllable as well. So there's always, me too, as a matter of fact. So we're all getting used to it. But that is the name syllable, Ray or G.
Well, describe that a little bit so that people understand what the heck that means.
Right. So people that use Vedic astrologers or will use Jyotish oftentimes, and it originated in India, will use astrologers to put the primordial sound, the name sound in their name. And it's just simply like a mantra or a sound that helps us just be more complete within ourselves. It's just another supporting energy.
By the way, you should note that the sound is about a vibratory quality.
Right. And frequency, yes.
Not any meaning in it per se.
Right. It's the vibration that producing the sound creates
in the universe, right, even if you don't say it loud.
Exactly. So one of the services that we offer is to give you your birth sound. So that, and you can find that by going to the link that's listed in the description. Additionally, we also offer astrology readings, personal astrology readings. We use Western, Chinese, and Vedic astrology. You can also request your preference for which approach, for whatever resonates most with you. And we also offer soul recovery. I'm a certified soul recovery coach. And this is a 12-week program. Basically, it's the journey through our soul and a way by which we can connect to our true selves and practice self-love in a way that's whole and beneficial for us and everyone else.
And for those who are not familiar, we offer live sessions in which you can ask questions during the program time, which is for Eastern Standard. Well, no, now we're in this.
Oh, right. So, Mike, we're going to go through the time zones. This is the one that's clumsy and fun for us.
We're in Eastern Daylight Savings Times, 1 o'clock.
Yes.
That would be 12 o'clock Central.
12 o'clock Central.
Central Daylight Savings Time.
11 o'clock Mountain Time.
Mountain Time, they don't have the Daylight Savings. And at
and California time, Pacific time.
10 o'clock.
That's going to be 10 o'clock.
California Daylight Savings Time.
So I actually have a friend that lives in Arizona, but they're on Pacific time as well.
So if you happen to come into the chat room while we're speaking, please do ask any questions you have, and we will go to you, because we offer the program whether someone is on or not. We'll at least give them information on this topic, astrology and many other things, as you will note as you follow us. Otherwise, we'll continue where we left off yesterday, or
we'll just continue being continuous.
Oh, by the way, we have to mention that these live programs are offered on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we'll continue where we left off last Wednesday.
Okay.
And that conversation was about how astrology was developed. Now, should we go a little further into that? Because I think we just touched the surface of that.
Oh, okay. Well, first, what I want to do is I want to welcome Sylvia to the chat room. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging with us. As you know, if you have any questions, feel free. Otherwise, just hang out with us, and comments are welcome as well.
Good. So what we said about astrology is that it could not have been developed by herdsmen or worse yet, by cavemen running around in pigskin overalls and with clubs in their hands. This system of astrology is so incredibly complex as far as the mathematics are concerned, that just about everybody that calls themselves astrologers, it can be almost certain that they do not know the mathematics behind it. Very few have gone that far. Those who do know that very well are the astronomers. And astronomy was founded out of astrology, but many years ago, if not thousands of years ago, astrology preceded astronomy. And what was astrology designed for? Everybody that knows anything about astrology would be inclined to conclude that astrology is about interpreting the events that occur between human beings. The fact of the matter is that this is not what astrology was founded for.
Right.
Not Western astrology, and not India astrology, and not Chinese astrology. These astrologies were really designed to describe what occurs between nations, what occurs in a nation, the weather patterns that we have, and incidences which are maybe directly related to interference of other
Right.
heavenly bodies, such as comets and meteors and debris.
Along with earthquakes,
So,
Uranus.
well,
Uranus and Mars.
earthquakes would be how the planets affect each other as they affect us here on Earth. And the case has been made that earthquakes can be predicted, just as rain at times can be predicted. Other things, such as the possibility of society having anxiety and negative effects. If you don't believe that, visit either a hospital or a police station during full moon.
Right.
There will be no question as to the fact that during the full moon, we have a problem in society, because the moon represents the emotions, or either the control of emotions or the loss of emotional, let's say, stability. So this is what astrology was for, and it's much more accurate in that regard than it is to describe personality.
Sure.
Why would we say that personality is difficult?
Because it's subjective, because it's subtle.
Exactly.
Even now, as we have all these ways to categorize personalities, and it's pretty good. Let me tell you something. Psychology has done some pretty interesting things, and they've really developed a discipline by which to measure the subtle. That's really fantastic.
This subjectivity that Carrie is describing is easiest to define when we say free will. Free will means that man has something more than most animals, at least as we have observed. And keep in mind that astrology has a lot to do with observation, but without the mathematics, you wouldn't be able to make sense of observation, because you wouldn't be able to calculate the movement of planets, when they would appear at certain parts of the sky, how they may affect each other in terms of the angles and the proximity that these heavenly bodies have to each other, especially as they affect the Earth. And we'll make our case that it does indeed affect the Earth.
Well, even as it turns out, there are certain degrees in each sign that can be activated specifically. The one I'm thinking of is actually when a planet is transiting from 29 degrees of a fire sign into a water sign. This is more in the Vedic astrology realm. But certain things end up translating, like, oh, I didn't think of it like that. Let me try this in my system. This is what that looks like. This is what's so great, right? Openness is the foundation for us to make any discovery. So what happens is a lot of floods can be predicted. Certain things can be predicted in the culture when a planet moves from the 29 degree into into a water sign. So it's a 29 degree fire sign to a water sign.
And this is based on gravitational pull, on angles that planets make to each other. One of the planets that we can easily describe as having effects on the Earth without having to go through the trouble of calculating every minute. But we know that Mercury, for instance, which rules the processes of the mind, when it is perihelion to the sun, it means it's moving away from the sun. The mind seems to be more crisp. When it is aphelion, meaning that it is moving towards the sun, the astrologers refer to the mind as being burnt or uh, what's the
Oh,
word for it?
combust.
Combust, which means that the native that has the Mercury moving in the direction of the sun,
And it's very close. It's
and less than 6 degrees
less than 6 degrees.
of distance between between the Mercury and the sun, that this individual may be prone to having confusion, or that the mind may slow down. This does not mean that they cannot be geniuses.
Right, or some distortion in that particular. Like, for example, I refer to my Vedic chart because it's the easiest for me. I have the sun conjunct Mercury in my second house, as my sun is a little weak, right? That represents the self and the soul and all of that, and sort of right the spotlight. I have lots of indicators for stardom, everybody does, don't they? It's not just me. But the sun says, you know what? It's not going to be about you. It's going to be about what you do, but you're not going to be the centerpiece.
Well, explain how you come to that conclusion.
Because my sun is weak. Because it
meaning what is it?
That in Vedic astrology,
to people what that means.
We have in Vedic astrology, we also have a way of ordering the planets in terms of their planetary strengths. That is based on their relationship to each other, their closeness to each other, house rulerships, and a variety of other rules that apply to the way that certain houses affect other houses. Like, for example, the fourth house from the moon can represent the mother, and then the fourth house from the moon, it can also represent the mother. In my case, it would be Capricorn.
Well, let's explain that the reason the moon and the fourth house can be synonymous in some ways is because the moon rules the fourth house. And therefore, the moon is going to have the qualities that are best pronounced when something enters the fourth house. This idea of planetary effect on the Earth is determined by the proximity of planets as they orbit around the sun, how they angle towards various other planets, how they affect us in terms of whether they're behind, whether they're to the side, whether they're in front of us. We call these aspects.
Right.
In other words, if let's say
their relationships,
right, where let's say where the sun is 0 degrees Aries, which means it's just entered Aries, and another planet, let's say Mercury, is 0 degrees Aries. Well, the proximity says that they were occupying the same space. So who's going to dominate in this case? It will be the sun. And that's the way you start to begin interpreting astrology. This gets to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is.
Because first you have to mathematically deduce this by the calculations. And secondly, then you have to come up with a certain, let's say, philosophy based on observations which occurred over many thousands of years, nothing like of which we think we're only 5,000 years old, or at least that was what was popular just a few hundred years ago.
Right.
The fact is that the universe is infinite, so even if we attempt to give it a time, we can say it's the Earth is 4.3 billion years. We really don't know, but that's what we surmise on the basis of what we're able to, let's say, measure from our observation. Well, we don't know that our observations are always totally accurate.
Right.
So what causes the readings that people give in astrology? It's mostly what we would call subjective, as Carrie mentioned before. Subjectivity is simply that each individual will interpret the aspects that planets make to each other according to their understanding.
Right.
And sometimes intuition falls into the category of interpretation.
Right.
And this is where people very, very much may differ in the way they conclude things. I like to avoid too much conclusion because I'm of the opinion that mankind simply does not know the answers to just about everything that we ponder in our minds. But these things are to ponder over. For example, the number 0. Well, 0 is something which was perhaps the most perfect number discovered by mankind. Why? It enables us to measure in the forward direction, which means plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, ad infinitum. And 0 also allows us to go minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, ad infinitum, which then poses a problem for us because we can count in either direction, but in the positive direction, we can't surmise anything until it happens,
Right.
because it's future.
Hmm.
And in the opposite direction, that what preceded before us, we find that it's a minus 0. Well, 0, as we understand it, as most of our society understands it, the value of 0 equals to nothing. But because of our 5 senses and 3 dimensions, our experience is that there is no such thing as nothing, or we don't know what nothing is. More properly, it is that we do not know.
Right.
So 0 is beyond our grasp. And
Sure.
so is positive 1, 2, 3, and so forth. It's something that we're grasping for, but we still haven't found it. And so astrologers
Right.
try to predict what that positive number is, and they try to go backwards too. These are the seance group. This is extremely subjective. What does it mean, subjective?
Right. So also what Michael is really alluding to is, right, another way that we say it is an absolute truth, right? And when we think about math, we think about the concept of an absolute value. What is the
Right.
absolute value of negative 13? What is the absolute value of 13?
We
Same
use
answer.
We use it even though we're working with something that's really unknown.
So
And it's concluded on the basis of what we can observe repeating.
even the hard sciences are an abstract language. There's no such thing as a hard science.
Right.
There are systems, there are ways that we've ordered things. And by the way, part of discovery is organizing and ordering things and testing them to see what the outcome is. And we can do that with anything. So even in terms of the absolute value in the number 0, we're already dealing with the complication of being on the planet, because even when we create something that we have material rules for, there's still 98% space, no matter how much something weighs in the 3rd dimension. And so here we are, we're back at the subtle again. We're back at the subjective.
And when we look at life per se and its vastness, and we don't know very much. We conclude all kinds of facts through tests that we conduct, but these tests are conducted within a state of boundary, a particular lab, a particular set of sequences, a particular set of perhaps minerals or
chemicals,
or entities that we think we have under our control, and we can measure their movements within a test tube. We conclude on the basis of our ability to observe and then to interpret.
That's right.
And both of those are very complex to observe. How do we know that we're completely observing in the most sterile way where nothing else interferes? We don't have that proof.
Because it's not possible.
Because it's not possible. You know, the mind has many, many thoughts going on, oftentimes simultaneous. We can't really tell how they began, and we don't have any idea of when they end. All we know is that we have them.
Except for when, all right, we talked about this a little bit the other show. For example, how do we know? Michael and I, we get in discussions. It can be really heated, believe me.
Oh, yeah. Heated because it's subjective.
Right. And then all of a sudden, we will both say, one of us will say something that's absolutely true.
And it hits on what we think is truth.
The whole fight gets out. I mean, the whole fight is over, and all of a sudden, we both know at the same time. We can always connect.
One of the ways that we try to reach at a point where we feel that we have reached some truth is when we can say, that makes sense.
Right.
When it starts to make sense, it's as if we've exceeded all boundaries. We're no longer contained within our preferences, within our experiences. we're going extending beyond that. And this is what astrology is about. It's to go beyond the boundaries and to hopefully deliver something that seems right. So we try to minimize our ability to predict. However, there are things that are very potent.
Right.
For instance, when Jupiter is perihelion, or should I say aphelion to the
Aphelion.
sun, it means that it's closest to the sun. And creates sunspots. The
Yes.
sun reacts to the fact that this large body is also exerting certain gravitational pull of its own, while the sun is responsible for holding all of the planets in their position. At least this is what we believe.
Well, we're actually, all of the planets are all responsible to each other.
Right, yes. The sun's, because of its size, and it's at the center, is said to be the one that has gravitational pull over all the other entities, let's call them heavenly bodies that rotate around the sun in our orbit with us all the time. Now, we know that scientists sometimes want to express their genius, and they say that there is no time, there is no space. And they base this on the fact that we have everything and we have nothing. Everything because we can count +1, +2, +1,000,000, +1,billion, +1,000,000,000,000. We can go on indefinitely.
Right.
We just have to create numbers to describe how far we think we've gone.
Right.
And conversely, we can then describe the past in the sense of -1, -100, -1,000,
Right.
-1,000,000.
How we
ad
organize our
infinitum.
days and our schedules.
So
Right.
this too is true. These two things are true. How can they both be true?
Right.
Because in the nothing, we shouldn't be here to talk about it. And in the everything, there's so much to know that not one thing describes the picture in its complete form.
And how can we state something that is passing in our culture, whatever that may be currently, as an absolute truth, as the absolute truth of reality, when the only constant is change?
So knowing this is beyond us. Knowing this is something we surmise because we add some things that we've put value on. We have, let's say, a bunch of marbles, and we start with 1, 2, 3, and we decide we have 100 of them. And now we know that we can count on 100 times if we need a marble. We start to measure life through certain bound states. The marble is bound to its shape and form as much as is our physical body, and in some ways as much as the way our minds are constructed. And this is the part which gets interesting, that hopefully Carrie and I will be able to
It's a fun conversation.
conduct a meaningful and interesting conversation about this process of the mind called psychology. And it too came out of astrology. Why do we say everything came out of astrology?
Carl Jung. Yeah. Oh,
Well,
incredible.
everything came out of Carl Jung was a strong advocate of astrology.
He's really the one that really applied astrology and used it. Incredible.
He applied astrology to psychology.
To psychology.
And there, in fact,
and to living, just a course of living.
He devised two terms that is used by astrologers, and that is the anima and the animus.
Yeah, the anima and the animus.
That there seem to be, at least from his studies, that human beings are born with either one of the two energies, one being the positive aspect of consciousness, the other one being the negative aspect of consciousness. Now, let's understand that consciousness by itself has both positive and negative, because consciousness represents the total sum of the universe. In many regards, that is what the best way to describe consciousness. So when he put this to astrology, he said that there are signs that are considered masculine and signs that are considered negative or feminine. Masculine is positive. What does that mean? Does that mean that they're better than the feminine signs? No. In fact, the earth is considered yin, which is feminine. And the physical body and all matter is under the quality of yin. Whereas yang is more of the unknown. The best that you could get to with Yang might be the soul, the
Right,
spirit.
the sun.
And we
Right.
say that that's masculine energy. Is one better than the other? No. You could not have the one without the other. You understand that in order to feel
Right.
cold, you must have felt warm before.
Right.
So the
So
same thing with positive and negative.
it is part of our purpose here to experience duality
Well,
because that's how we connect with
it's the nature
oneness.
the nature of man.
The nature of
And
man.
many astrologers will look at Gemini because it's the first mutable sign. And for those who haven't watched any of our previous programs, mutable is also described as dualistic, as um, common, as
Right.
in conflict.
Changeable.
Changeable. It describes something which is one way at one moment and it switches suddenly to its counterpart. And that's mutable. Dualism is mutable. And of course, we have Gemini as the first dualistic sign because it is the third sign of the spring signs. The astrology is considered to start its approach to all of the heavenly bodies and how they're affected by the spring. Spring is what denotes our beginning, let's say, where we start, let's say, the trip. But it doesn't describe that this is where we came from because
Right. It
to start-
represents birth.
yeah,
Yeah,
to start
but
the
not
trip or
necessarily.
even birth,
Right.
you had to come from somewhere. But we'll get into that kind of
A
conversation
seed of consciousness.
as we go on. But so the yang is not totally known because we consider when we die, and I prefer to use the word when we disappear, meaning that
When the
we
body
still
dies.
exist,
Mhm.
but we're not visible, or we can't discern that existence in this three-dimensional world and five sensory cognition. So the fact that the male is yang does not make him better than the female. For the yin is also honored. It is also mathematically put together. It's a perfect unit of a human being. Look at how complex we are.
Right.
How could
Because
we ever think that yin is less than yang?
with the death of the body, what that really means is that I say it like that one of our colonies of consciousness, one of our ribbons, is no longer capable of being receptive to the masculine light. It no longer creates life, now it creates death. Without receptivity, nothing can exist.
Now, it has been described for those who get into going further into trying to discover, let's say, a higher intelligence, which we may refer to as God or something else, that the um, the yang somehow is like God, and the yin is like matter, or diminishes through the fact that we have boundary. Well, without a boundary state, you cannot have an open, continuous state of consciousness.
Right. 3D requires
It
a
will-
particular kind of boundary.
Right. We cannot describe death as space, but rather as pure consciousness. We reach a place where we're no longer in need of a body, or at least, at the very least, we're not using a body to experience anything. And in fact, we cannot make a case for death or disappearance because our the forces that make up and comprise human beings is not accessible. It's not measurable. So you see how important it is that we have yin. And when we look at the yin and yang signs, they're described by a circle with two parts enveloping one another, like in the shape of a 69.
Yes.
But it's so complicated that there are, in the white area, we have a black circle within, and in the black circle, we have a white, which tells you that you need the other all the time.
That's right.
You need to be that inside that white is black, and inside black there's white, so that in death there is something of the material world still intact, and that in the material world, which we are now using as we speak, there's something of the white or the spiritual. And this is what a lot of people who want to do clairvoyant readings and predictions, they're trying to get to unite
They're tuned
the
to
two
that, right?
qualities, the white and the black and the white, as a continuous state of consciousness.
Precisely.
And,
And
and
oh,
go ahead, go
Right.
ahead.
I just wanted to add a little public service announcement about this, by the way. Your best psychics, if we're going to do a reading, because sometimes people read but your best psychics are people that always talk about connection. There's no curse, there's none of those things, there's only energy. And so, and those are the people that
Well, let's
the minute that you
define.
start hearing a reading that focuses on separateness, you're probably not getting, take what you get, but you're probably not getting the best information.
Well, this whole idea of yin yang, black and white, white
Right.
and black, scientists like to use the word.
I was going to give another example in contrast.
Well,
but-
give one.
Oh.
I can finish.
So when Michael was talking about sort of the way the sun can have the overwhelming energy and scorch, I've been kind of looking at the series called Super Pumped. It's about Travis, the CEO, the founder of Uber. And what I noticed is that he is a Leo, year of the dragon in 1976. So he is a fire dragon. And I can see that his modality is, and you can kind of see how his relationships are falling apart with the people he cares about, but I can see that his modality is to be special forces and just bomb everything and dynamite it and blow it up and treat it like war until he no longer can get away with it anymore. And so you can see now and where I am that he's already burning bridges with the people that he was supposed to care about and creating the corporation with.
We've just said that yin merges into yang, yang merges into yin. They cannot be destroyed. They merge into one another, even though you can see them as distinct and apart from each other. But the little circle in each of the larger circles shows that there is no separation. Modern scientists would call this matter versus energy. You can destroy matter, but it cannot go away, because when you take matter apart, you revert back to energy. So matter being yin, it's taken apart, becomes yang. Yang becomes active and creates yin. And we have matter versus energy, energy becoming matter, matter being decomposing back to energy, and back and forth, back and forth. So even science that wants to see everything in a test tube laboratory setting has come up with these ideas that have no basis for proof. They have not been able to demonstrate this matter turning to energy. We know that it must work that way because we see earthquakes, matter
Right.
converting to energy, lightning, fire in general, heat versus cold, water versus
Wind.
earth,
Mhm.
wind versus other life forms that we have. We see that one becomes the other. And so this, we still do not understand this process. We do not. In fact, maybe the problem we have is that we think it's a process
Yeah,
rather than it being a state of consciousness.
right.
If you look at it from consciousness, now we have a scale that is infinitely available
Very
to
right and convoluted.
describe incredible
Yeah.
things that our minds can create. And incidentally, the mind is controlled by various signs, at least as astrologers have seen it. But let's keep in mind, and Carrie could admit to this, that nothing in astrology is fixed and hard. These are indicators. Just as when you make a prediction, which is, in my mind, wasteful time, because as soon as you express something, it's no longer predictable.
Right.
And that is the problem with predictions.
So what about now? No, now, no, now, no. Now is
Right,
now. Now is
right.
now. Now is now.
It's
Yeah.
already gone into the past. So predictions by themselves, you might say, self-destruct. Once you've spoken, it's not a prediction.
I was, it Michael made me think of just of all of the systems that we've developed, and astrology, as far as we know, ish, is the oldest system that we have for interpreting humankind. And it came before what we have now, and everything that we've created now is another system upon another system. And what we do as human beings is create strategies, otherwise known as systems, to deal with pieces of discomfort as they come up. And so part of also what, right, and we get carried away because we're like, look, we can make discomfort more comfortable, and we get mystified with our own selves, right, in that capacity. And it's like our whole world becomes about creating comfort in the quickest, easiest way possible. But the problem is that that system is built on ignoring the most important principle, which is universal truth. Do we need to be comfortable immediately, or do we need to shed some of our own ignorance to give ourselves true comfort, true contentment?
Well, to shed ignorance, we have to express ignorance, and it drops from us. Hopefully,
Right. We can't hide it.
it becomes
You can't
subject
hide
to
your
review.
ignorance.
It becomes subject to criticism, and possibly it might enlighten us. Ignorance may be, it's like the black and the white. Out of the darkness, there's some light in it. So ignorance can bring mind for the truth, because there's some truth in everything, and there's some ignorance in everything. At Leprechaun Alley, we will like to be remembered and known during the course of all our podcasts, that we will be describing and talking about consciousness as the base of almost everything that has to do with astrology, or basically any other philosophy or event on this planet. For consciousness is something which eludes us rapidly. We as soon as we think we have it under our finger, it disappears.
Right.
It's just all of a sudden we think we have the light, and then all of a sudden we find that it's surrounded by dark.
As
Much
soon
like
as
the Yin and Yang symbols.
Right. As soon as we engage into action, it disappears. As soon as we go into
Exactly.
activity, it disappears.
Because activity generates form.
Right.
Form is generated, at least as occult scientists have determined, and this is again information that goes back many, 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 many thousands, if not millions of years ago, that when you express something, you're simply working from another side of the universe, without which you cannot have the bound state. That the universe somehow was here always, always. No such thing as it being created. This is hard for us to imagine. And so when you're trying to predict with astrology, the question becomes, what came first, the event or the knowledge that it might have taken place? And it becomes maybe the past. Only the event really was known because of the past, or did the past inject the future? This is the part that's difficult for astrologers to really dissect.
Right.
And so we use mathematics as the know-it-all, be-it-all standard. But even our mathematics is not pure. To give you an example, we know that the laws of attractions require a negative force with a positive force. We can't explain how these bodies can coexist when there's a third member in the picture. It's not just one that's black and one that's white. Now we have a third, and this is not known. What is not known is that you have consciousness which is including more than anything we can imagine. No matter how much we interpret, our job will be that we keep searching, and that is what Carrie and I will be doing. And
I
we
even
can
wanted
add
to
that.
point out, when it comes to the atom itself, the neutron is not an actual whatever version of our physical way that we see the atom. It's not an actual
It's never
physical
been
thing.
seen.
It is a mathematical abstract.
That's right. It's never
It
been
comes
seen.
from the same place as consciousness. That's why.
Exactly.
And so, and we can't tell a neutron how to behave. It can be present when certain conditions are here, but we can't tell a neutron to behave because we can't even be sure it
No,
exists.
but it's a value that we've assigned.
And it's a value
to
that
explain
our God natures
what
have assigned.
what we don't know. That's what it really is. And that would make sense. Now, because it would make sense, it is on that basis that we consider a neutron as real, and it's there, and it's working, and we've been able to calculate how it works, even though
Right.
we've never seen it.
Because we have the language. We have
Exactly.
the language.
And this
the
involves
mantra.
consciousness.
Right.
Consciousness is that ability to intuit that which has not been prescribed to us by action or by physical appearances. By the way, we were talking about sound at the beginning of this session. We talked about how my name is Michael G. and Carrie is Carrie Ray.
Yeah.
That these syllables at the end of the name
Beginning.
prescribe a certain vibration.
Right.
You do not have to make so much sound that your ear hears the sound, just as you do not hear the incredible quantity of sounds that exist in the universe. There are sounds. And we know that what happens to sound that we make? It turns into a vibration that becomes more and more subtle. And the more subtle that word becomes, it eventually turns into light. And light eventually turns into matter. Now we're starting to see something.
Light comes from sound.
Something that we do not understand how it can possibly be that this body is created by light. It has to be created by light because it reflects light when it's shined upon. And the heavenly bodies are simply the members that are sitting there saying, I see you, this is how I affect you, this is how I don't affect you. That astrology is trying to gather information from the planets as if the planets were speaking to the predictor, the guy who's predicting or the woman who's predicting.
Right.
And here it's delicate because
astrologers have to have receptivity. Absolutely.
And they have to know when their own personal feelings or viewpoints enter the discussion as opposed to it's intuited and it just seems real and it cannot be explained why, but there is that sense of certainty. And sometimes these people who predict will have information that is true because they were in tune properly, and most of all, were able to translate it into words, and better yet, into words that you may understand if one is analyzing your personality on the basis of your horoscope.
I also wanted to say on the note of sound producing light, what's so interesting, because the speed of sound is not nearly as quick as the speed of light. So when we produce a sound or these frequencies merge with other frequencies, now you have something that's traveling at the speed of light. Right. And because we're always thinking about speed and you know, the spaceships and Star Trek, and we want to go in that direction, we're asking a question at the improper level. At which point do we affect change in the physical world? Well, the weird thing is that it's when we facilitate light and the speed of light begins.
To make things a little bit more clear, why is light the part that causes creation or the body? Because the light becomes concentrated. And that is how a physical body is made.
Right.
We know that we need light in order for anything to exist, to be seen or known. And so it's concentrated light. And that's what happens. So that there is a yin and a yang quality aspect of light. First, it's sound. Let's call that black. Then there's the feminine. Then we'll say that there is light. Let's call that white or spirit. When the light starts to let's say, concentrate, we have the body. Goes back to creating something yin, but something visible. It takes on a form, it takes on senses. We get 5 senses out of it. We have 3 dimensions by which to measure things. So all things are driven by consciousness, except that man is perhaps the only creature that takes this into account, that even
Right.
tries to delve into conscious states. We can't see this in animals, and
Or
we
that's
have
apparent to us
it's
anyway.
apparent to us. We
Right.
don't believe that animals are capable of doing that because consciousness is what allows everything to transcend into higher things. We don't see animals changing from swinging on a tree to tilling the ground and
Right.
making and raising crops. We don't see this ability of other animals to use let's say, a greater part of consciousness to the point where we can discuss consciousness. Animals can't discuss that, at least not to our knowledge.
At least not with us, as or at least, and again,
But
even
we do
then,
we do
right.
have an ability to communicate with animals.
Communicate. Yes.
A lot of us do by the way we look at the animal. Animals get a sense of what you're saying when you're talking.
Right.
By looking at you, they got that information. When they see each other, they know if they're friends or enemies. They know if from a great distance, a wolf will see a she,
Right.
a wolf. Well, no, it's a she. Doesn't need anybody with signs all over her that says, "Here, I'm your female. You want me?" No, he wants her as soon as he sees her because he knows that she's a female. How does he know? It has to be at a level of consciousness which is more, let's say, quiet in the animal kingdom than it is in our world.
Right.
We attempt to describe it, and there we have a lot of confusion.
Right.
Look at what psychology has gone through in far as changes. They were performing lobotomies at one time, which was absolutely hideous. That wasn't the way to approach the problem.
No.
Go ahead, Ed, you can add in any time.
I was just thinking actually about the way that music progressed too, especially when we came across electronics, right? And so we had it was like country music and folk music and all of these different beautiful forms. And honestly, I didn't even realize what a wealth of music was out there well before we listened to our music that we consider music, right? And so what I think is interesting is that it starts off with this beautiful melodic quality. It makes sense. It's organized. It speaks to a lot of people. And now we get into the boomer generation. You still have a lot of that music. It's beautiful, but they want to break free. They want to change the way that they operate in relationships and society. And so what comes from that is we got heavy metal and death metal and punk rock, all things that I appreciate. But when you listen to it, what it sounds like to me is they're trying to disrupt the noise. They're trying to disrupt bullshit. And they get stuck on that as well. It's this other noise. It's this great disruptor to disrupt the ego, to disrupt what everybody, for example, and when you listen to it, you get that, it's like a dense, heavy,
Well, they wind up making worse noise than what they're trying to disrupt.
Right, maybe.
Well, I think they
or from different generations, and I was
That's
a punk
true.
rocker.
I like subtle, easy.
And Michael was working the entire time the hippies were having fun.
I like smoothness. I like songs that have a sense of emotion that is peaceful and at rest.
Yeah.
Or gets excited, but pleasantly, not where you want to block the noise out of your ears.
Well, I literally, when I was 20 years old, I shed the punk rock skin immediately and just started listening to Guitarro. Because I was like, all right, I got it, I get it, know what it means.
Guitarro was one
I can't
of my
listen to it
generation.
anymore.
That was the end of my generation.
Right.
And there's a lot of music like that.
Around the time when your generation started becoming grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
The first,
So
And
That's
so
a,
this is how Michael and I intersected as well in our musical taste is more of the ethereal flavor of music. So I have to go listen to punk rock music in someplace else away from him if I'm going to be able to listen to it.
so now that we're bringing astrology down to the, let's say, the base value, where does it begin? This conversation that we just have had, it has to be applied to astrology. Astrology is not just memorizing a sequence of values that we assign to different signs, but that we can transcend those values to understand how it is that they came about and why. For instance, to give you an example of this why versus how, um, let's take one day you have an appointment and you're running late, and all of a sudden everything gets in your way and you just get there an hour later. You can look at that as what a horrible thing. I just lost good, valuable time and I missed my
The
appointment.
universe is plotting against you.
Right. Or you can look at the whole picture, and that is that you are just falling in line with the events that are going on, with the energies that are there, and perhaps you avoided an accident. You weren't late. You became safe. So this is the problem with interpreting anything that we have to say. That we can look at it as a negative because, well, by all other standards, missing an important appointment, maybe you would have gotten a job if you had been there on time. That it resulted in something, avoiding something more negative. So their negativity becomes relative to the whole picture, not just to the one that we're fascinated with and hold it in our minds. This is the problem for humanity. We see things and sight freezes us onto the object. That is why light, which is we consider takes place with our eyes when we see things. The light that comes back gives us an image, and we believe in that image. But change the lighting, and the image changes. And you see light in a more subtle way is constantly creating things that we think are solid that may just be light. But
Right.
it is light because that's what light eventually does.
Well, and what's so funny is that what informs us about what that object is comes from many different sources that we've long since forgotten. But they're all part of us as well. So there are many things that are informing us about what an object is other than light as well. But all of those things have been exposed to light at one time and integrated into something else.
And if you think that this is a little too hard to accept and that you have a vehement disagreement with this idea of light becoming the matter, how is it that matter grows? How is it that all things, whether they're vegetables or whether they're flesh, without light, it gets destroyed?
Yeah, I can't grow.
You need light to promote the physical.
Right.
So tell me again that light is not the physical, it turns into the physical. These are properties of life that we absolutely don't really understand completely because we cannot dominate these events in a test tube condition in a laboratory. Our knowledge is based all on what we can accomplish in the laboratory, what tools we have, what chemicals do we have. Do we stumble upon something new? It's
Well, there's
based,
an arm of knowledge.
it's
Yeah.
based on repetition, repetition, repetition until, whoa, by golly, you produce the same result because you're using the same standards.
Right.
This is a mistake.
Right.
That life is constant and immediate. It is spontaneous. It's hard to, or at least to my knowledge, near impossible to describe how life generates itself. Now, we get into the argument of if we look at Ancient Aliens, which has been a popular program for a number of years on TV, that we were created by some other aliens. I have always had a problem with that philosophy. Seems nice. It seems a good, easy way to say, here's how we came. It seems to answer everything right away. But I have a big problem because it begins to cause a tremendous question in my mind. If we were created by say, the ancient aliens,
The
what,
Anunnaki or
the Anunnaki, those who from the heavens came down to earth, how do we explain how the Anunnaki were created? It gets silly to start saying that something got created, and it seems to be much more accurate. I don't know if Carrie wants to get into this conversation, but it's much more accurate to say that life was spontaneous, is spontaneous, continues to be spontaneous, and it is an exercise of matter converting into energy, and energy converting into matter, and that this process has gone on forever. Because if we get into it happened a million years ago or
Mhm.
3 trillion years ago or whatever, we find that we come to the end. And if you come to the end of anything, as we know here on Earth, we've only really arrived at the beginning of something else.
Well, the things that I think are very interesting, that I think about when I'm thinking about this subject is when people, the powers that be, the establisher, we have all kinds of words for them. Of course, we easily ourselves could have been the establishment at one time. We don't know what our spiritual purpose
Well, to
is.
somebody,
Welcome,
we're the
JG. Good to
same.
see you. So what happens now, I lost the train. What I was talking about is, gosh darn it, because this is what I was thinking about it, and then I was thinking too much.
Well, we were talking about.
Oh, it's when we're trying to build these monumental buildings, when we're trying to modify the face of Mother Earth, when we're trying to put our name on, I'm giving you $150 million so you can hang my name on a building in Harvard. The truth of the matter is, there's no way for us to put anything in perpetuity in the third dimension because it doesn't obey the rules of perpetuity.
No, we're in a bound state.
And when we go into our place of knowing, that's the only way we can be in our eternal connection
Well,
and state of consciousness.
approximate entry into a fuller state of consciousness. Consciousness has degrees of expressions through the individual. It's up to the individual on how aware he becomes, and that's based on how impressed he is by the information that he gets from the society, from the people, from the culture that he's from, and his desire to know. And now we get into astrology, and we will talk about the signs that have that desire.
So yes, so astrology covers everything. So it's really just a venue by which to introduce different topics that really are about life in general
Because
and metaphysics, which is really the sum of what we've practiced in our lives. This just happens to be our particular toolkit.
Because whether we know it or not, just about everything arose out of our desire to understand ourselves by observing the stars, and we concluded certain things, which even to date, I'm not so sure that it came about the way the stories tell it, that the sheep herders developed astrology.
Well, there's a lot of stories that we haven't seen. Believe me, there's a lot more that I don't know.
I don't believe that sheep herders did this.
Right, I don't either. I mean, well, there's more to the story.
Astrology is the complexity of the mathematics.
We certainly don't know.
Were developed eons of time before even sheep herders existed. We conclude things on the basis of how we come into the world, having nothing, and then we develop something. But that's not how the universe got created.
Right.
It never did get created.
And so what I wanted to finish with my 3 seconds of conversation is that when we want something to be permanent, of course, it is our dharma, our purpose to have these experiences. But when somebody is really pushing for something to be in perpetuity, it's a fool's errand because it's not going to happen. The only place that they're going to have the experience of the eternal of perpetuity is when they're in the state of consciousness, and then we're all in the same place. So it's a fool's errand. And on the one hand, you can say, well, why are these people doing this then? They're crazy. They're blah, 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 blah. And on the other hand, if it's your job to do that, then the question is, why not? It's still possible
Well,
to do it.
it's seeking truth. That's basically what is the basis of all knowledge.
So oftentimes greed itself, for example, is a really um, it's a really distorted expression of our desire to go on eternally. And it's completely unnecessary because we're already
Well, it
eternal.
certainly belongs to a fixated state of mind.
Absolutely.
And many things happen there. Criminals are in a fixated state. Psychotic people are in a fixed state of existence. It is when we shut off in preference of something we like or we are attracted to or we believe, so many things that where we stop asking and we insist that we know. The only
Right.
thing that we know, honestly, we can say that, and we can't say that for certainty, is that we don't know. And because we really don't know, we can't even say that we really don't know. Because if you don't know, you wouldn't know that you didn't know. Or you don't know that you have another knowledge that may change your mind about not knowing. So everything we say about ourselves, believe it or not, belongs to the past, and it's no longer true. Everything that we say is no longer true. What is truth? Your ability to decipher what's coming at you, and if you say it properly, others will agree because they'll witness similar events or similar energy. So life really is the truth is what's going on at the very moment that you are observing it. And it's no longer that the second or split seconds later. So what you think you know is really not a lie. It's just not the knowable because it's no longer available to you. Your previous thoughts belong to a world that no longer exists. And your new thoughts come from a world that you don't know exists. And that's where we are as a people. We're between not having a past existence because it's gone, and not knowing what's coming for future existence because it happens without us knowing beforehand.
So we're getting toward the hour here, toward the end of the hour, and we've just been filling it with our random thoughts. And all thoughts welcome. Please, if you have any other ideas about the nature of reality, of truth, anything
Have that
philosophical,
conversation with us here.
yes, leave your comments below. And what we'll do with your suggestions as well is I can also organize more materials to focus on something more specific. We would love it. It's so important to me. This is my thing. I really want to connect and share with people. I really want us to find each other in a state where we're just connected with our knowing, where our ego isn't in the way, where we aren't mandating ourselves, where we really want to know. And by the way, I also wanted to say the only way to be in this 3D reality dimension is curious. The only thing we can do to get through this life, to elevate our consciousness, is to remain curious. Once we stop remaining curious, that's when everything breaks down and all flow ceases. So they always say curiosity kills the cat. When someone says that to you, what they're saying is don't look behind the curtain, right? Because death is not the opposite of birth. So it's time to look behind the curtain. And what we'll find is actually beautiful. Do you have any closing thoughts on that?
Well, what I would have said about the truth is that it's something which you have to be awake to experience it. You really can't look for anything truthful. It has to be you awakening to it. So, in a sense, knowledge is a birth in your mind.
And as always, I always want to leave you with some other people to check out or some other good reads. I'm always, you know what I really encourage people to do when we're looking at the world of science, the best book, and it's dense. It's not a lot of pages, but it's a dense and complex material, is The Structure of Scientific Revolution. Thomas Kuhn does an amazing job of really dealing with the development of how science and how everybody ended up in these special mindsets and these special ways. And he really discusses, without literally saying it, well, he does too, how science really evolved from a metaphysical framework, as all things do, from a state of observation. So it's a really amazing. Mostly when we get in trouble with it with science is because we start delving politics, and there's just no reason to do that. Also, I want to make some recommendations for Bruce Limpton, also another great guy to check out. Jane Roberts, look at her series. She's amazing, man. She really is very, very talented mystic. And yes, I have my funky glasses on. I can't find the good ones. So you have to watch me with a rubber band on my glasses to hold them together, but they have the screen protectors. So check out the Black and Orange channel. It's on Black and Orange Tarot. She reads live every day. I believe at noon. I think it's Central Time. Oh my. Linda G, the Comanche Psychic Violetta, Sterling, Celtic Tarot, The Spirit Within, The Way of Positive Change, Intuitive View, Third Eye Champagne, and very popular Vedic astrologer, very talented, Joni Patri. So, and I will tell you, even when oh, yay! Oh, the awesome Sylvia. I will tell you that what's fun for me is when I'm watching other practitioners, of course, I'm thinking about, I have to know their signs, right? I have to know their combination. But it's beautiful because when people are operating from a place of good faith, you can see the signs just come out, and you're going to see me get emotional, and it really moves me. It really touches me. I think, wow, it's so amazing that our universe just works so well together. So with that, we're going to close. Anything else you wanted to comment? Yeah, I'm getting.
Not for today.
Okay. As always, everybody, all our love to you, and travel light.
Bye.